The morning bell rang across the Galactic Defense Academy, and Li Jinwu opened his eyes to another day of proving he didn't belong. Around him, other recruits stirred in their bunks. The Vorthak warriors stretched their massive arms and growled, softly. The Zephyrian pilots moved with quick, bird-like motions as they prepared for the day. Even the other humans seemed more confident than Jinwu felt. Park Minho rolled out of the bunk above him and landed with a soft thud. "Another day in paradise," he said, pulling on his training uniform. Minho was everything Jinwu wasn't: tall, strong, and born into a military family. His father had been a decorated officer, and everyone expected Minho to follow in those footsteps. Jinwu sat up slowly and rubbed his eyes. He was shorter than most recruits and built like someone who spent more time reading than fighting. His test scores were average at best. His physical performance barely met the minimum requirements. Sometimes he wondered how he had even made it into the academy. The recruits filed into the mess hall for breakfast. Long tables filled with beings from across the galaxy. The Vorthak sat together, their blue-scaled skin gleaming under the lights. They were warriors from birth, raised on a planet where only the strong survived. Each one stood nearly 8 feet, tall and could crush steel with their bare hands. At another table, the Zephyrians ate quickly with precise movements. Their home world had low gravity and constant storms, making them incredibly fast and agile. They could dodge projectiles that other species couldn't even see coming. The crystalline beings didn't eat at all. They absorbed energy directly from special charging stations. Their crystal bodies could share thoughts instantly with each other, making them perfect for coordinated attacks. When one crystalline learned something, they all knew it within seconds. Jinwu sat with the other humans, but he felt out of place even among his own species. Kim Soo-hyun talked about her mother's war stories. Bai Tae-hyung discussed advanced battle tactics he had studied since childhood. Lee Hyejin showed off the combat knife her grandfather had given her. "What about you, Jinwu?" Soo-hyun asked. "Any family in the military?" Jinwu shook his head. "My parents run a small farm on Earth. They grow vegetables." The table went quiet for a moment. In a galaxy where military service brought honor and respect, farming seemed almost primitive. Minho tried to change the subject, but Jinwu could see the looks on their faces. He was the odd one out, even among humans. After breakfast, they gathered in the main training hall. Commander Thexaval stood at the front, his Vorthak frame imposing even among his own species. Battle scars covered his arms and face, telling stories of countless fights. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Today, you will face combat scenarios," he announced. "These tests will determine who has the skills to protect the galaxy and who should consider other career paths." Sergeant Cordon, a crystalline instructor, added, "The defense systems require precise coordination and quick thinking. Those who cannot adapt will not survive their first real battle." The first exercise was hand-to-hand combat. Pairs of recruits faced off in padded arenas while instructors watched and took notes. Jinwu found himself matched against Grixtar, a young Vorthak who seemed to enjoy showing off his strength. The fight lasted 30 seconds. Grixtar's first punch sent Jinwu stumbling backward. The second knocked him to the ground. But as Jinwu rolled away from the third attack, he noticed something interesting. Grixtar favored his right side. When he threw punches with his left hand, there was a tiny delay, barely noticeable but definitely there. "Pathetic," Grixtar growled as he helped Jinwu to his feet. "Humans are too weak for real combat." Jinwu nodded and said nothing, but he filed away the information about Grixtar's weakness. It might be useful someday. The next test was weapons training. Each recruit received a standard plasma rifle and had to hit targets at various distances. The Zephyrians excelled at this, their quick reflexes allowing them to acquire targets almost instantly. The Vorthak were slower but incredibly accurate once they aimed. Jinwu's performance was exactly average. He hit most of the targets, but took longer than others to line up his shots. His accuracy was decent, but not impressive. When the scores were posted, his name appeared right in the middle of the list. "At least you're consistent," Minho said, trying to be encouraging. Consistently mediocre, but consistent. During tactical exercises, teams had to work together to complete objectives. Jinwu found himself assigned to less important roles. carrying equipment, providing cover, following orders without question. The other recruits naturally took leadership positions while he blended into the background, but Jinwoo watched everything. He saw how Velmaya, a Zephyrian pilot, always attacked from the same angle when she had a choice. He noticed that the crystalline beings, despite their shared thoughts, had predictable response patterns to certain situations. He observed that even Commander Thexval had habits. The way he shifted his weight before giving complex orders, the subtle changes in his voice when he was testing them versus when he was actually teaching. In the evenings, while other recruits relaxed or socialized, Jinwoo studied. He watched combat footage from previous academy classes. He read tactical manuals that most recruits ignored. He analyzed the fighting styles of different species, looking for patterns and weaknesses that others might miss. "Why do you bother?" Minyo asked one night, finding Jinwoo hunched over a datapad. "You're never going to be the best at anything here. Maybe you should transfer to logistics or engineering." "There's no shame in supporting roles." Jinwoo looked up from his studies. "I just want to understand how everything works." "Understanding won't help when someone is shooting at you," Minho replied. "You need to be faster, stronger, better. You need natural talent." The weeks passed in a blur of training exercises, academic classes, and physical conditioning. Jinwoo's scores remained stubbornly average. His instructors rarely called on him in class. During group projects, he was assigned to research and support roles while others handled the exciting parts. Commander Thexval pulled him aside after a particularly poor performance in a flight simulator. "Recruit Lee," the commander said, his massive frame casting a shadow over Jinwoo. "I have reviewed your file. Your test scores were barely sufficient for admission. Your physical performance is below average for your species. Your tactical knowledge is basic at best." Jinwoo stood at attention. "Yes, sir. I am wondering if you might be better suited for civilian work. There is no dishonor in recognizing your limitations." "I understand, sir, but I would like to continue training." The commander studied him for a long moment. "Very well, but understand that the final assessment is approaching. Those who cannot meet the standards will be dismissed from the program." As Commander Thexval walked away, Jinwoo felt the weight of everyone's expectations, or rather, their lack of expectations. To them, he was just another human who had somehow stumbled into a program meant for warriors and heroes. That night, as he lay in his bunk, listening to the sounds of the academy settling down for sleep, Jinwoo made a quiet promise to himself. Maybe he wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the smartest recruit, but he would find a way to prove that there was more to being a defender of the galaxy than raw talent and impressive scores. The final assessment was only days away. Soon, everyone would see what he was really capable of. The announcement came during morning formation. Commander Thexval stood before the assembled recruits, his voice carrying across the training yard like rolling thunder. "The final assessment begins tomorrow," he declared. "Each recruit will face solo combat trials against Academy defense drones. These tests will determine your final rankings and assignments." Excited whispers spread through the formation. This was what they had all been training for, the chance to prove themselves in individual combat. The strongest would earn positions on elite strike teams. The fastest would join reconnaissance units. The smartest would command their own squadrons. Sergeant Cordon stepped forward, his crystalline body reflecting the morning light. "The trials will be conducted in the main combat arena. Each session will be recorded and broadcast throughout the academy. Your performance will be evaluated by the entire command staff." Jinwoo felt his stomach tighten. A public trial meant everyone would see exactly how average he was. There would be no hiding behind team exercises or support roles, just him alone against whatever the Academy's defense systems could throw at him. The betting pools opened immediately after the announcement. Recruits gathered around datapads, placing wagers on who would perform best. Kim Soo-hyun was the early favorite among humans. Her tactical scores were impressive, and she had shown real leadership during group exercises. Bae Tae-hyung ran second, known for his ability to think several moves ahead in any situation. Among the alien recruits, Grixtar dominated the Vorthak betting. His raw strength and aggression had impressed even the instructors. The Zephyrian pilot, Velmaya, was considered untouchable in speed-based scenarios. The crystalline candidates were wild cards, Their hive-mind coordination made them unpredictable in solo combat. Nobody bothered to bet on Li Jinwu. The trial schedule was posted that evening. The top-ranked recruits got prime-time slots when the entire academy would be watching. The afternoon sessions would have smaller audiences, but still significant attention. The late-evening trials would be observed mainly by instructors and dedicated supporters. Jinwu found his name at the bottom of the list. His trial was scheduled for 0300 hours, the graveyard shift when most of the academy would be asleep. It was the time slot reserved for recruits who were expected to fail quickly and quietly. "At least you won't embarrass yourself in front of everyone," Minho said, trying to sound supportive. "Most people will miss it entirely." The first trials began the next morning with great ceremony. The combat arena was a massive circular chamber with multiple levels, obstacles, and environmental hazards. Spectator galleries surrounded the space, filled with cheering recruits and stern-faced instructors. Kim Soo-hyun went first among the humans. She entered the arena wearing standard combat gear, basic armor, a plasma rifle, and emergency supplies. The arena's defenses activated, releasing a dozen combat drones programmed to provide a challenging but manageable threat. Soo-hyun performed admirably. She used cover effectively, picked her shots carefully, and completed the trial in 18 minutes with only minor injuries. The spectators applauded as her final score appeared on the displays, well above average and respectable for any military academy. Bai Tai-hyung followed with an even more impressive performance. His tactical mind allowed him to predict drone movements and set up advantageous positions. He finished in 15 minutes and took no damage at all. The crowd cheered louder as his score placed him in the top 10%. The alien recruits were even more spectacular. Grickstar simply charged through the arena like a living battering ram, smashing drones with his bare hands when his weapons ran dry. His time was poor, but his raw power was undeniable. Velamaya danced through the arena so fast she seemed to blur. The drones could barely track her movements as she struck from impossible angles and vanished before they could respond. Her trial lasted only 12 minutes, setting a new academy record. The crystalline recruits worked with perfect efficiency, their shared consciousness allowing them to process information faster than any individual could manage. They dismantled the defense systems with mechanical precision. As the day wore on, the crowds began to thin. The most exciting trials were over, and the remaining recruits were considered less interesting. By evening, only the most dedicated observers remained in the galleries. Jinwu spent the long day studying footage of the completed trials. He watched how the drones moved, how they coordinated their attacks, and how they adapted to different fighting styles. He noticed patterns in their behavior, subtle things that most recruits missed in the excitement of combat. The drones always attacked in specific formations. When facing multiple targets, they prioritized threats based on weapon signatures rather than actual danger. They had programmed response delays when switching between different types of attacks, small details that might not matter in a 15-minute trial, but could be important in a longer engagement. At midnight, the academy grew quiet. Most recruits were asleep, preparing for classes the next day. The few remaining spectators were mainly friends and instructors of the late-night participants. Jinwu made his way to the arena preparation room at 0230 hours. The duty officer barely looked up from his data pad as he handed over the standard equipment, the same basic armor, plasma rifle, and supply pack that every recruit received. "Trial scheduled for 45 minutes maximum," the officer said in a bored voice. "Emergency extraction available if needed. Medical team on standby." Jinwu nodded and began putting on his gear. In the adjacent preparation room, he could hear another recruit getting ready, probably the Zephyrian pilot scheduled for 0345 hours. At exactly 0300 hours, the arena doors opened. Jinwu stepped into the combat zone and heard the heavy barriers seal behind him. The spectator galleries were nearly empty. A handful of instructors sat in the observation booth, but most looked half asleep. The automated cameras began recording, but the live broadcast feed showed only a few dozen viewers, mainly fellow humans who felt obligated to watch. The arena's environmental systems hummed to life. Lights dimmed to simulate various combat conditions. Obstacles shifted into new positions, and somewhere in the control systems, something went wrong. Dr. Yoon So-young sat in the medical monitoring station, watching biometric readings from the current trial participant. As the head of psychological services, she often worked late shifts to observe how recruits handled stress and pressure. Something about Lee Jin-woo's psychological profile had caught her attention. Test scores that didn't quite match his observed behavior during training. The first wave of drones emerged from their deployment bays. Standard procedure called for 6 units in the initial engagement, programmed for training-level threat assessment. But Dr. So-young's medical sensors showed something unusual. The drone's power signatures were reading much higher than normal. The arena. Jin-woo raised his rifle and took aim at the approaching drones. They moved differently than he had observed in earlier trials, faster, more aggressive, with weapon systems that seemed fully charged rather than set to training levels. First plasma bolt barely missed his head. Dr. So-young frowned at her readings and opened a communication channel to the control booth. But before she could speak, every system in the monitoring station went dark. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, but all communication with the arena was severed. In the control room, automated systems continued their programmed functions. The trial was proceeding normally according to their sensors. The safety protocols showed green lights across the board. The emergency extraction systems remained on standby, waiting for a signal that never came. And in the arena, Lee Jin-woo faced the first wave of what should have been a routine training exercise, not knowing that he was about to fight for his life against machines programmed to kill. The first plasma bolt hit the wall behind Jin-woo, leaving a smoking crater in the reinforced metal. This was not training-level power. These drones were firing real weapons with lethal intent. Jin-woo dove behind a concrete barrier as more shots rang out. His mind raced as he tried to understand what was happening. The 6 drones that should have been using practice weapons were now hunting him with military-grade plasma rifles. Their movements were faster and more coordinated than anything he had seen in the training footage. He peeked around the barrier and counted the enemies. 6 drones, just as expected, but they were spreading out in a pattern designed to trap him. Their optical sensors glowed bright red instead of the usual training yellow. Whatever had gone wrong with the system, these machines now saw him as a real threat to eliminate. The plasma rifle in his hands felt different too. When he checked the power settings, his heart sank. It was still set to training mode. Enough to disable a practice drone but useless against military-grade armor. He was facing lethal enemies with non-lethal weapons. A drone rounded his barrier, weapon raised. Jin-woo rolled away and fired 3 shots into its optical sensor cluster. The training-level plasma barely scratched the surface, but it was enough to blind the machine. The drone spun in confusion, firing randomly. Jin-woo used those precious seconds to reach another piece of cover. His instructor's words came back to him. When weapons fail, use your environment. Jin-woo looked around the arena with new eyes. The obstacles weren't just cover. They were tools. The arena's own systems could become weapons if he was smart enough to use them. He spotted a maintenance panel on the wall behind him. During training, exercises, these panels were locked down, but emergency protocols should have opened access when communications failed. Jin-woo pried open the cover and found exactly what he hoped for: manual controls for the arena's environmental systems. The gravity generators were the first thing he targeted. With a few quick adjustments, he created a low-gravity zone near the center of the arena. When 2 drones flew into the area pursuing him, they suddenly found themselves floating helplessly. Jin-woo used his training rifle to push them into the arena walls where they crashed and sparked. 4 drones remaining. The machines adapted quickly. They began avoiding the gravity trap and coordinating their attacks more carefully. Jin-woo realized these weren't just malfunctioning training drones. They were using advanced combat AI that learned from every encounter. He needed to think differently. In all his studies, he had noticed that most people fought the way they trained. They used standard tactics because those tactics worked in normal situations. But this was not normal. The rules had changed, so he needed to change too. Jin-woo abandoned everything he had learned in training classes. Instead of seeking cover and returning fire, he went on the offensive. He sprinted directly at the nearest drone, using the arena's lighting system to create shadows and blind spots. When the machine turned to track him, he slid beneath its firing line and jammed his rifle's barrel into its power coupling. The training weapon couldn't penetrate armor, but it could overload exposed systems. The drone's internal power cell exploded in a shower of sparks. Jinwoo grabbed its military-grade rifle before the metal frame hit the ground. Now he had a real weapon. The remaining 3 drones immediately changed tactics. They recognized the threat level had increased and began using advanced combat formations. They coordinated their movements and created crossfire zones that should have been impossible for a single person to escape. But Jinwoo had spent weeks watching these machines in training scenarios. He knew their programming patterns. When they formed a triangle to trap him, he knew exactly where each drone would position itself. When they synchronized their fire, he knew the precise timing of their coordination delays. He used the arena's obstacles not for protection, but for misdirection. He made noise in one location while moving to another. He used reflective surfaces to confuse their targeting systems. He even used the destroyed drone parts to create false heat signatures that drew their fire. The second drone fell when Jinwoo rigged an improvised explosive using power cells from destroyed machines. The third went down when he turned the arena's own defensive systems against it, using maintenance codes he had memorized from technical manuals. The last drone was the smartest. It had learned from watching its companions destroyed. It stayed mobile, kept its distance, and used the arena's geography to avoid Jinwoo's traps. For 20 minutes, they fought a deadly game of cat and mouse among the obstacles and platforms. Jinwoo's military rifle was running low on power. His improvised weapons were used up. His body was starting to tire from the constant movement and stress. But his mind remained sharp. He had noticed something about this last drone's behavior pattern. It always sought the high ground when possible. It preferred long-range engagements. And it had a slight delay in its targeting system when switching between multiple potential threats. Jinwoo created multiple false targets using reflective panels and power cells. When the drone rose to a high platform to get clear shots at all, the decoys, Jinwoo used the arena's zipline system to swing directly beneath it. The machine's targeting system couldn't track him fast enough. His final shot took out its repulsor system, sending it crashing to the arena floor. Silence fell over the combat zone. Jinwoo stood among the wreckage of 6 military-grade combat, drones breathing heavily but alive. His training uniform was torn and scorched. His face was cut from flying debris. But he had won against impossible odds. Then he heard more mechanical sounds from the deployment bays. The arena's damaged systems were still running their program, but with none of the normal safety limits. Instead of the standard 6-drone exercise, they were deploying waves of combat units, as if facing a full military assault. A dozen more drones emerged from hidden passages, followed by another dozen behind them. Jinwoo looked at his nearly empty weapon, his exhausted body, and the growing army of machines. The real fight was just beginning. In the empty spectator galleries, automated cameras continued recording. The footage showed impossible things. A single human recruit defeating advanced military hardware using nothing but cleverness and determination. But no one was watching the feeds. The academy slept on, unaware that in their training arena, one young man was fighting a war that would change everything they thought they knew about human potential. Chief Engineer Han Woo-jin had been trying to fix the communication systems for 2 hours when the first alarm finally went off. He looked up from his control panel to see warning lights flashing across the main display. The combat arena was showing massive power fluctuations and structural damage that should not have been possible during a routine training exercise. "What the hell is happening down there?" he muttered, pulling up the arena's status reports. The readings made no sense. Weapons discharge levels indicated sustained combat. Environmental systems showed multiple failures. The gravity generators had been manually adjusted dozens of times. It looked like a war zone, not a training facility. He checked the trial schedule and felt his blood run cold. Recruit Lee Jinwoo had entered the arena at 0300 hours. It was now 0630 hours. The exercise should have lasted 45 minutes at most, but one human biosignature was still active in the combat zone. Han Woo-jin opened an emergency channel to Captain Cho Da-yoon. "We have a situation in Arena 7. I'm reading 3.5 hours of continuous combat activity. We've lost all communication with the trial participant." Captain Cho was the head of Academy Security and had seen her share of training accidents. But when she reviewed Han Woo-jin's data, she knew this was beyond anything in the Emergency Procedures Manual. "How many drones were deployed for this trial?" Standard protocol calls for 6 units maximum, Han Wu-jin replied, checking his logs. But the system shows 57 separate combat units have been activated. 57? Captain Cho grabbed her equipment belt. Assemble an emergency response team, full combat gear. We're going in. In the arena, Jinwoo faced his greatest all-challenge yet. The second wave of drones had been different from the first. They moved in perfect coordination, sharing information instantly and adapting to his tactics in real time. He had defeated them, but barely, and only by using every trick he could think of. The third wave brought flying units, drones that could attack from above while others approached on the ground. Jinwoo had used the arena's automated systems to create electrical fields that disabled their flight systems. But the effort had drained most of his remaining power sources. The fourth wave included heavy assault units with armor too thick for his weapons to penetrate. He had collapsed part of the arena's ceiling to crush them, but the falling debris had nearly killed him too. His left arm was badly bruised and his breathing was labored. Now he faced the final group, 12 drones that had learned from every previous encounter. They knew all his tricks, all his hiding spots, all his preferred tactics. They moved with deadly precision, forcing him into smaller and smaller spaces. Jinwoo's captured weapon was down to its last few shots. His improvised explosives were gone. Most of the arena's systems were damaged beyond use. He was exhausted, injured, and nearly out of options, but his mind still worked clearly. These drones were smart, but they still followed patterns. They had learned to counter his previous tactics, but that also made them predictable. They expected him to hide, to run, to use the environment defensively. So he did the opposite. Jinwoo used his few remaining power cells to overload the arena's gravity generators one last time. But instead of creating a trap for the drones, he created a zero-gravity zone around himself. In the weightless environment, his smaller size became an advantage. He could change direction in ways the heavier drones couldn't match. The machines struggled to adjust their targeting systems to three-dimensional movement. Their programming was designed for ground-based combat where up and down had fixed meanings. In zero gravity, Jinwoo could attack from any direction. He used the walls, ceiling, and floating debris as launching points. His final few shots had to count, so he aimed for the most vulnerable systems, sensor arrays, power couplings, joint mechanisms. Each hit disabled rather than destroyed, but disabled was enough. The last drone fell just as Jinwoo's strength finally gave out. He floated in the zero-gravity field, unconscious from exhaustion and blood loss, surrounded by the mechanical wreckage of what had once been an army. Captain Cho's emergency team breached the arena doors to find a scene that looked like a battlefield. Scorch marks covered the walls. Parts of the ceiling had collapsed. Destroyed drone components were scattered everywhere. In the center of the destruction, one young human floated unconscious in a gravity field that shouldn't have been possible to create. "Medical team, get in here now!" Captain Cho shouted into her communicator. She had served in real combat zones that looked less damaged than this training facility. Medical Officer Jung Eun-ha arrived with her emergency team and immediately went to work on Jinwoo. His vital signs were weak but stable. Multiple cuts and bruises covered his body, but no life-threatening injuries. The most serious damage seemed to be simple exhaustion from sustained combat stress. "How long was he fighting?" Dr. Jung asked, as her team prepared Jinwoo for transport. 3 hours and 47 minutes, Han Woo-jin replied, still staring at his readings in disbelief. "Continuous combat against adaptive military-grade hardware." As they moved Jinwoo to the medical bay, Captain Cho walked through the arena with her security team. They counted the destroyed drones and tried to understand what had happened. The evidence told an impossible story. A single recruit had fought and won against odds that should have killed him within minutes. "The automated systems recorded everything," Han Woo-jin reported. "But this is going to need command-level classification. If this footage gets out before we understand what went wrong..." Captain Cho nodded. A training accident that revealed system failures was one thing. But this looked like something else entirely. Like the Academy had accidentally created the perfect test of human combat potential. In the medical bay, Jinwoo slowly opened his eyes to find Dr. Jung checking his responses. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired," Jinwoo replied honestly. Did I pass the trial? Dr. Jung exchanged glances with Captain Cho. The young man seemed genuinely unaware that he had just accomplished something extraordinary. To him, it had simply been a survival situation that required adaptation and persistence. The trial results are still being evaluated, Captain Cho said carefully. There were some technical difficulties that need to be investigated. Jinwoo nodded and closed his eyes. He assumed his poor performance during the system malfunction would result in failing grades. He had no way of knowing that his poor performance had just redefined what human beings were capable of achieving. The footage was immediately classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of command staff would ever see what really happened. In Arena 7, officially the trial would be marked as inconclusive due to equipment malfunction, but Dr. Yoon So-young, who had been the only person monitoring the systems when everything went wrong, made sure to save copies of the medical readings. Someday, she knew, the galaxy would need to understand what they had witnessed that night. 6 months after graduation, Lee Jinwoo was assigned to a small patrol ship monitoring the Outer Rim territories. His final academy ranking had been exactly what everyone expected, middle of the class, suitable for routine duties. He served under Captain Park Ji-soo, a veteran officer who ran a quiet ship far from any real action. Jinwoo didn't mind the assignment. He had never expected to become a hero or lead great battles. The peaceful patrol routes gave him time to study star charts and learn about different alien cultures. He was content with his simple role in the vast galactic defense network. Then the emergency broadcasts began. The first reports came from the Kepler system. An entire defense fleet had vanished without a trace. Initial investigations found no wreckage, no distress signals, just empty space where 12 ships should have been. Command assumed it was some kind of equipment malfunction or navigation error. The second attack hit the Centauri colonies. This time, there were survivors. They described creatures unlike anything in the galactic databases, machines that moved like living things, adapted to every weapon used against them, and struck with perfect coordination. The survivors called them the Davak Swarm. Within days, similar attacks occurred across 17 different star systems. Entire fleets were being destroyed by enemies that learned and adapted faster than conventional military tactics could handle. Every standard defense strategy failed because the Davak analyzed each encounter and developed countermeasures in real time. At the Galactic Defense Headquarters, Admiral Ko Sungmin stared at tactical displays that showed nothing but bad news. Red indicators marked lost colonies, missing fleets, and failed rescue missions. Traditional military thinking had proven completely useless against an enemy that could adapt to any strategy within hours. "We need something different," he told his assembled staff. "Every tactic we've tried, every weapon system, every formation, they learn to counter everything. We're fighting an enemy that gets stronger every time we engage them." General Park Hyun-woo pulled up the latest combat reports. "Our best units are being defeated not because they lack skill or courage, but because the Davak turn our own strengths against us. Speed becomes predictable patterns, strength becomes obvious targets, intelligence becomes rigid thinking." The room fell silent as military minds grappled with an impossible problem. How do you fight an enemy that learns from every encounter? How do you defeat machines that adapt faster than living beings can think? Dr. Yoon So-young, now serving as a senior military psychologist, spoke from the back of the room. "There might be something you should see." She had kept the classified footage from Arena 7 for exactly this moment. As the lights dimmed and the main display activated, she explained what they were about to witness. A single human recruit facing adaptive combat AI under conditions that should have been impossible to survive. The first few minutes of footage showed standard combat. A young man with basic equipment facing training drones in what appeared to be a routine exercise. But as the recording continued, the assembled officers began to understand they were watching something extraordinary. They saw Jinwoo realize his weapons were inadequate and immediately adapt his tactics. They watched him turn the arena's own systems into weapons. They observed him defeat machines that learned from every encounter by constantly changing his approach. But most importantly, they saw him do something that no traditional military training had ever taught. He stopped fighting like he was supposed to and started fighting like the situation demanded. "He never uses the same tactic twice," General Park whispered, studying the footage intently. "Even when a method works, he immediately changes to something different." "Look at his movement patterns," added Fleet Commander Yoon Minji. "There's no predictable rhythm. Every action serves multiple purposes. He's not just surviving, he's making it impossible for the machines to predict his next move." Admiral Ko watched the zero-gravity combat sequence with growing amazement. This recruit didn't defeat those drones through superior firepower or speed. He won because he could adapt faster than they could learn. The footage showed Jinwoo's final victory and collapse, then cut to the aftermath, the destroyed arena, and the shocked faces of the recovery team. Dr. Soyoung let the silence stretch before explaining the full context. This happened 6 months ago during a routine training exercise. The recruit believed he had performed poorly due to equipment malfunctions. He graduated with average scores and was assigned to Outer Rim patrol duty. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. While they had been struggling against an adaptive enemy with conventional tactics, the perfect counter-strategy had been hiding in classified training footage. "Where is this recruit now?" Admiral Ko demanded. Within hours, emergency orders went out across the fleet. Captain Park Jisoo received an urgent message to return to headquarters immediately, bringing her entire crew for special assignment briefing. She was confused but compliant. Emergency orders were not questioned in wartime. Jinwoo reported to the briefing room still wearing his standard patrol uniform, wondering if he had somehow made a mistake that required high-level attention. The room was filled with admirals, generals, and senior staff, more military leadership than he had ever seen in one place. Admiral Ko stood at the front of the room as large displays showed his own combat footage from the academy. Jinwoo watched, in confusion, as the screens displayed his desperate fight in Arena 7. "Recruit Lee Jinwoo," Admiral Ko said formally. "You are watching classified footage of your final academy assessment. Until today, only a few people knew what really happened in that arena." Jinwoo stared at the screens showing his battle against the malfunctioning drones. He had always assumed it was simply a system failure that resulted in an incomplete trial. Seeing it now from external cameras, he began to understand why everyone was watching him so intently. "The DVAC swarm has defeated every conventional military force we've sent against them," General Park explained. "They adapt to our strategies faster than we can develop new ones. Traditional military thinking has proven inadequate." Admiral Ko stepped closer to Jinwoo. "But you demonstrated something in that arena that we're only now beginning to understand. You didn't just defeat adaptive enemies, you showed us how to fight in a completely different way." The reality of the situation slowly dawned on Jinwoo. The galaxy was facing an enemy that could learn and adapt to any conventional strategy. Military leaders who had spent their careers mastering traditional tactics were helpless against machines that could counter their every move. But in a training accident 6 months ago, one average recruit had accidentally demonstrated the solution: constant adaptation, unpredictable tactics, and the uniquely human ability to think creatively under impossible pressure. Fleet Commander Yoon looked directly at him. "The DVAC swarm has conquered 17 systems because they can adapt faster than our military can think. But you've already proven that human adaptability can outpace machine learning." Admiral Ko's final words changed everything Jinwoo thought. He knew about himself and his place in the galaxy. "Recruit Lee Jinwoo, the war against the DVAC swarm begins with understanding what you showed us in that arena. You're going to teach us how to fight like humans instead of like soldiers." As the briefing continued, Jinwoo realized that his greatest failure had actually been his greatest success. The galaxy needed warriors who could adapt and improvise, not just follow established tactics. And somehow, without ever meaning to, he had become exactly the kind of fighter the war demanded.